Hi everyone, welcome back to Swedish Plant Guys. We get so much question from you subscribers, and we love it that you are so excited and that you want to know more on how to take care of your plants. Just keep the questions coming, and we promise you that we will try and answer as many of them as possible. And as usual, we answer them in this type of videos, the Q&A videos. So watch out for the Q&A videos and see if your question has been answered. But we take a lot of questions and bundle them together. So even if it's not specifically your question, we could be answering your question with another one. You understand what I mean. So starting off, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And like and share, it helps us a lot. And hit that bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. Now getting started, question number 1. This is concerning our Q&A video cutting from a Dracaena. Do I cut a Dracaena massangeana the same way? I've never cut it before, but it's already a huge tree. I'm scared to kill it. Well, in that video I make a cutting out of a Dracaena JL type of Dracaena. So the question here is, can I do the same for my massangeana? And the answer is yes. All types of Dracaenas you can make cuttings of in the exact same way as in that video. So if you have a Dracaena and you want to make a cutting out of it, please go and watch that video because you can do the exact same thing. There is only one thing I need for you to consider, and that is that never try and make a cutting out of a Dracaena stem that has bark on it, because it can work, but it will probably not work. So only make cuttings out of stems that are green or that hasn't got any bark on them yet. But otherwise, yes, you can do that to all of your Dracaenas. Question number 2. And this is in Swedish, so I'll translate for you guys here. My ZZ plants are very old, so I replanted them. Of course, I gave them water afterwards, and now the stems have become yellow. Can I save the plants? Should I put them in sun? Because the soil is very moist. What should I do? Well, first of all, ZZ plant likes to be quite root bound, so you only need to repot them when they really bulge out of the container. But if you have to do that, then of course you will replant it. And when you replant it, it is super important that you don't give too much water, and I think that is what has happened here. You've given it a little bit too much water, and the stems are starting to become yellow. That is usually the sign that says to you, okay, I've given too much water. Now what can you do about this? Well, first of all, if not all of the stems have turned yellow yet, then you might be able to save a few of them. What I would do is to pull out that plant again, pull off the soil that is too moist, and repot it one more time. And this time, let it dry out completely before watering it again. And make sure that that soil you repot it in is a soil that can't absorb too much water. Now you can use pumice or perlite or something to make it a little bit airier so that a lot of the water runs out and runs through the system. So you don't get that problem again. However, if all of the stems have been turning yellow, what you can do is that you can actually go in, repot the plant again, just like I said before, and then cut off all of the yellow stems. Just cut them all off. Because as I say in our All You Need to Know About Samioculcas or the CC plant video, this plant has something we call tubers or rhizomes, underground stems where they store water, nutrients, proteins, all of the goodies are stored in these tubers. So if the tubers haven't gotten injured yet of overwatering, then it doesn't matter that the stems are turning yellow. If you cut them off, the tubers will start to produce new buds, new stems, and you will get a new flush, a new of green, a new stems coming out of that plant. So because when the stems are turning yellow, there's not much you can do. It will eventually die. What happens is that the tubers are, when it starts to get yellow, the tubers are actually sucking up a lot of that nutrients, trying to store as much as it can in its bulb, and then it will let that stem go completely. So that's why you can go in, cut that off, and the tubers will start new shoots and new stems. But make sure that you never give too much water to your CC plant. It will kill that plant. It needs to dry out completely. Even when you have repotted that plant, let it dry out in between watering. Question number 3. Now this is also concerning our video on all you need to know about the CC plant, or the Samioculcas samifolia. Can this plant be left outside during the spring and summer month? Well, this is of course depending on where you live in the world and how your spring and summer is looking. Because the CC plant doesn't want temperatures under 15 degrees Celsius. So if you know that it's going to go below that, you can't have it outside. But if you know that you will be over that, then yes, you can put it outside. But make sure to consider 2 things in the outdoors. One is that you put it somewhere where it doesn't get too much direct sunlight, because the sun will burn the leaves of your Samioculcas. So put it somewhere where it's very shady or partially shady. And also another thing is rain. Make sure that you don't put your plant somewhere where it can get rain on it. Because even if you have a warm summer, you could have a lot of rain, and the Samioculcas doesn't want to stand in too much water. It wants to dry out. So make sure that you put it somewhere under some form of cover, and make sure that the rainwater doesn't hit the pot, so that you can decide when it needs water and not the nature itself. But otherwise it works fine. Just keep a mind of the water and the temperatures and the sunlight where you put it. Question number 4. This is also concerning our all you need to know about the CC plant. Some leaves of one stack of my CC plant have turned yellow and is turning light brown from the edges too. Other stacks of the plant is healthy and is giving out new shoots too. What am I doing wrong? What should I do? Well, this is almost the same question as we had before. The stalks here of the Samioculcas is turning yellow, which is an indicator that you have given too much water, that you need to let it dry out more. But in this case, it's only one stack. It's one of the stalks of the Samioculcas that is turning yellow. So what should you do? Well, that stalk that is turning yellow, as I said before, you can cut that off completely. However, one thing that can happen with a Samioculcas is if you always water it at the same point. Every time you water at the same point. That point is going to get more water and more moist than the other parts of the pot. Even if the soil is going to suck up a lot of water and it's going to distribute it, but where you have watered, it will always be a little bit more moist. And what can happen then is that that tuber that is next to that water, or those roots that are there where you water, can be injured. And then you have a problem with maybe just one of the stems. So make sure when you water it that you distribute the water evenly in your container, so that you don't give too much water to one individual tuber or individual roots. So distribute the water, but make sure that you don't give too much. Question number 5. There isn't a lot of natural light in my house, probably a common problem for many plant lovers, so I installed a few grow lights to support my plants, at least in the winter. But I keep but I keep them on at night. They are in the kitchen and turn them off during the day. The plant seems to be doing pretty well under them, even growing, but I heard that plant needs darkness just as much as they need light. Is that true? Very good question. Very, very good question. And it's one that is not very easy to answer because it's not white or black in this case. It's something in between. Some plants need to have a dormant part of the day. It needs to have the night to be able to store a lot of energy and prepare for when it starts to grow again during the day. Some plants need that. But there are plants that can take light all of the 24 hours a day. So it's not that easy to say yes or no. However, it's my experience, and I have over 20 years experience of taking care of plants, that if you don't know specifically that this plant actually likes to have light all day, then don't give it that. Give it a night. So what I would recommend you to do here is that you add that grow light. If you know that you don't have enough light in your kitchen, add the grow light during the day so that you get more light during the day, and then shut them off at night. A plant needs between 12 to 14 hours of light, and then it needs to go dormant during the night. So it needs both light and... So add the grow light during the day, but for at maximum 14 hours a day, and then shut them off. But if you have some type of plant that starts to react to this, then maybe that plant is beneficial to having light all of the day. So maybe you can move that to somewhere else and just add light even during the night. But mostly they need to rest during the night, just like us. So that is my answer to you. Thank you. Moving on, question number 6. My CC plant stems have dark patches on them. What does that mean? Is it too much water? I would really appreciate a reply. It depends on what you mean by dark patches. If the leaves of your CC plant starts to get dark patches on them, or starts to become brown or black, then something is wrong with your plant. However, if you look here at this CC plant here, you can see here on the stem that it has some dark patches like this. And this is normal. This is nothing to worry about. Our experience is that the lighter and the more sunlight that hits your Zamioculcas, the more of these dark patches are going to start to appear on the stems of your plant, not on the leaves, on the stems. It's nothing to worry about. However, if the dark patches here doesn't look like this is just a coloration, but if the dark patches, if you feel on them and they start to get a little bit mushy, or you can feel that it's not like the rest of the stem, then you could have a fungus problem. But if it looks like this, it's not a problem. Don't be afraid about it. Just keep doing what you're doing if your plant is feeling well. This is nothing to worry about. Question number 7. This is concerning our video, all you need to know about pumice or volcanic rock. So, do you fertilize the pumice the same way you would with soil? Good question. Answer is yes. I always recommend people to add the fertilizer to the water. Mix it with water and then water your plants. And that is exactly the same if you have soil or if you have a pumice mix. However, as I've said before, it's very important because since pumice doesn't have a cation exchange capacity, it isn't able to bind nutrients to its surface. Your pumice mix needs to have something added that can do that. In the pumice we use, that is clay. because clay has a cation exchange capacity. It could be something else. It could be vermiculite. It's another particle that has the capacity to bind nutrients, cation exchange capacity. But if you have that in your pumice mix, then yes, you add your fertilizer exactly the same way as you do with soil. And I always recommend that when you water with fertilizer, or when you water anytime you water, to water and to distribute the water and fertilizer all around the pot, so that you just doesn't add it at one spot and then let it run through your system. Because you want that fertilizer to lock onto the particles in all of your container. So add the fertilized water to all parts of the soil or pumice that you have in your container, so that you have a higher hit rate on something binding those nutrients, and then the roots can get a hold of that nutrients and add it to the growth of the plant. Question number 8. I believe I have a dragon plant, and this is concerning our Dracaena. All you need to know about Dracaena's video. I believe I have a dragon plant, however it's half the size of yours and has a trunk of 4 to 5 inches thick. What would you happen to know what variety this could be? Well, there is a huge varieties of dragon plants or Dracaenas, but there are only a couple of them that get that really thick trunk. One of those is the corn plant, the Dracaena massangeana, and that has some variation in color on the leaves, very wide leaves and variations. They can get a really thick trunk. However, it will probably not get that in your house because it needs to be standing somewhere. I know that in South America they use the dragon plant as hedge planting. So they cut it off every season, cut it like a hedge, straight off, and then it grows, and then they cut it, and then it grows, and then they cut it. And the stems there get really, really thick over time. So you get what we call here a mother plant. And that it sounds like you have one of those mother plants. That is really difficult to get by yourself in your home because you don't have the exact humidity, you don't have the exact amount of light to get it to grow like that. But the corn plant is one of them. But also the standard Dracaena fragrance also has that very barky stem. All of the Dracaenas that have much bark on them has the ability to grow really thick. However, it almost needs to have that thickness to it when you get it, because you will probably not be able to grow it like that in your house. But those are the two varieties, I think, and the normal Dracaena fragrance is completely green. So if you have a coloration difference on it, it's the massangeana. If you have a completely green leaves, it's probably the normal standard fragrance. Moving on, question number 9. I have a question concerning Hoya carnosa tricolor. Now this is concerning our video, all you need to know about Hoyas. My plant leaves is thin and leaves look saggy. Also few of the leaves are turning yellow and falling down. I live in Sweden and I'm placing it on an east-facing window. Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? This can be quite common in Hoyas. But first of all, we need to look at this. Why are the leaves starting to become thin and look a little bit saggy? Well, we can quite quickly figure out that it must have something to do with the water not being able to reach the leaves properly. So something is wrong with the water moving in your system, moving inside of the Hoyas. It's not getting all the way out, or it's not getting enough water all the way out to the leaves. And here it goes down to something we call, and this is so important for a healthy plant. You need to have a balance between water and oxygen in your root system. If you don't have that balance, if you have too much oxygen or too much water, that balance is shifted and you get a problem. And you can see that on the foliage of your plant. So what I think has happened here is 1 out of 3 things. First of all, you're saying that you have it on an east-facing window, which means that it's getting direct sunlight during the mornings or during the first part of the day. And that is fine. A normal Hoya that is working correctly should be able to take that. It should even prefer that positioning. So that is good. However, if you know that that east-facing window maybe is east-south, so it's getting a lot of sunlight a long time during the day, the first thing I would do is to move that somewhere where it gets a little bit less sunlight. That could be the first thing, because what happens when you get too much sunlight on those leaves is that all of the water that it's sucking up from the roots is just evaporating straight out into the air. It cannot hold that water, which means that the leaves are starting to dry out. And it looks saggy and it looks thin because it cannot hold the water. So by moving it somewhere where it doesn't get that much light, that is step 1, if this is what it is. Number 2, as I said, balance of water and oxygen. If you're not getting enough water in your pot, you could have a problem with percolation. Now, this means that if you've had your Hoya standing in the same pot for a very long time, it could have a massive root system. And when you water the plant, it looks like it gets the water, because the water goes through your system, but a lot of the water may be going out to the edges of the pot and straight through here, because you have a massive root system. So you get too much air instead of water in your system. Then you have a loss of percolation. You get too much oxygen, not enough water. On the other hand, if you have repotted your Hoya and you've repotted it in maybe in a larger container, and when you've watered that plant, it could be getting too much water. And if it's getting too much water, it could be that your roots are starting to hurt from this. It's starting to die. And that is why you're not getting that water out to the leaves. And the leaves are starting to look thin and saggy. So here you have 3 different things. You could get too much sunlight so that the plant cannot access that water. It's just moving straight through the system. 2, you get a loss of percolation. What it means is that the roots is not getting water. It's getting too much oxygen instead, which means that the leaves look saggy and looks thin. Or you're getting too much water and the roots are getting damaged. So you have 3 different things to look for here. So I think it's one of these, but you just have to find out which one it is. Question number 10. And this is also concerning all you need to know about the CC plant. I'm not getting any new growth on my CC plant. There are only 5 stalks. Do you know of anything I could do to encourage that? And I think is meaning encourage new growth. Well, as I say in the video, there are a couple of things you can do to make this plant really thrive. But first of all, the reason why it's standing still could be that it's focusing a lot of its energy on the tubers and the roots. So it could be that your plant is feeling well, but it's right now making a lot of energy to make sure that the roots are growing and that the tubers are filling up with nutrients. This could be one reason. So you could be doing everything we say in that video, but still not getting any growth. But what you can do to maybe try and force it is that the CC plant can take a very dark place. We say this in the video. However, it wants quite a lot of light to grow and to expand and to flower. So what you could do is actually move it somewhere where you get more light and try and find a place where you get a lot of light but indirect sunlight, because you never want the sunlight to hit the leaves of the Samioculcas. So move it a little bit to a lighter spot. What you can also do, if you haven't done it already, if you see that it's looking good otherwise, it's not growing yet but it's looking well, you could add some fertilizer. But with the CC plant you should be very careful because it doesn't want too much fertilizer. So buy a complete fertilizer, something that says that it has all the nutrients, including the micronutrients, and then start to add it when you water your plant. And maybe just mix it up a little bit more, little less concentrated than it says on the box, because you don't need that much nutrients for the Samioculcas. So if you do these two things, move it lighter and start to add a little bit of fertilizer, I think you will force it to start to grow again. But you don't have to be afraid, because sometimes the Samioculcas can stand still, completely still, for a very long time. I know that we have had Samioculcas that have been standing still for 1 or 2 years before it starts to grow again. It's quite common, so it shouldn't be growing all the time, because then it's always using a lot of nutrients. So it's good sometimes that it's standing still. Question number 11, and this is also concerning all you need to know about the CC plant. I have a question regarding my CC plant. It was a large plant that was doing great, but outgrew its pot, distorted the pot and bulged. So I tried repotting, but the root system was too huge to fit into a large pot. So I reluctantly cut off many of the roots so it would fit in the pot I wanted. The plant is sort of surviving now, but far cry from its earlier health and lush growth. Is there something I can do to avoid this in the future? This is a great question, because the CC plant has an extensive root system, and also it has the tubers. So there are a lot down in the pot that is competing for space. First of all, the CC plant likes to be in a closed, very confined space. It wants to be root bound. It actually likes it. So, but eventually you have to repot it. As you say here, the roots are almost crawling out of the pot. Then you need to repot it. And this is a problem for all of us that love plants. That when our plant is getting to be too big, it's so big that I can't repot it in a larger pot anymore. I need to have it in this size. What should I do? And here is a general advice for you. This is the rule that we use as soon as we repot something. And that is, when you repot, always make sure, if you need to cut off roots, you only cut off maximum 1/3 of the roots. Never take away more than 1/3. And when you take away roots, always take away roots that are in the bottom of your pot. Roots that are down here. That is where you start to remove roots. Because if you start to remove on the sides here or inside of here, you're actually cutting off the roots very close to the stem, or in this case, very close to, in the Samioculcas case, very close to the tubers. And you don't want to do that. You want to take, if you have the tuber here and you have roots growing out, you want to take the roots from the outside in towards the tuber. But never more than 1/3. However, and usually that means that the plant will survive. It will take a long time for the Samioculcas. If you've gone in and cut the roots, it will take a long time before you see any new growth, before you see that it's starting to get really healthy and starting to emerge new shoots. So it's not a problem for you. Just take care of it as you're doing, but it will take a lot of time. But in the case of the Samioculcas, you have another option, we've made another video called How to Propagate Your CC Plant. And in that video we tell you that you can actually divide the semiculca, so you can make more plants out of one. What you're actually doing is that you're taking those tubers and dividing them from each other. And then you get, from one plant, you can get 2, 3, 4, or 5 new plants. So that is another thing you can do here. But when it becomes too big, you can actually divide that plant and make a new one. And then the original plant will become smaller and fit in the size pot you want it to fit in. So go and check that video out where we tell you exactly on how to do that. Question number 12. This is also concerning our video All You Need to Know About the CC Plant. How often should you water your propagating CC plant leaf or stem cuttings that is in soil instead of water? Good question. In our video How to Propagate the Semiculcas, 3 ways to propagate the semiculcas in an easy way, we use that you divide the tubers, and then we use a cutting from a stem and cutting from a leaf in water. And the reason why we're not taking up, because you can actually propagate the semiculcas straight into soil. However, we have found that you have a higher success rate if you propagate it in water than directly in soil. That is why we've chosen to take up those ways to propagate your semiculcas. But if you have a cutting in soil that you put directly in soil, it is super important that that soil needs to be a little bit moist. Now, what does that mean? Where is the boundary between moist and wet, or between moist and dry? That is very difficult to answer. But we can say like this: you need to add a little bit more water to your soil for a cutting of a semiculcas stem than you would normally do for the finished plant. It needs to be a little bit more moist, and it does not want to dry out, especially if you do not have, as it says in the questionnaire, you don't have a tuber or a rhizome at the bottom of your cutting yet. Because then you don't have a water reserve or an energy reserve. If you only have roots, small roots, then you need to keep the soil a little bit moist at all times. So don't let it dry out. And it will work fine. However, we have the experience that if you propagate in water, you will have a higher success rate than directly in soil. Question number 13. And this is concerning our All You Need to Know About Pumice video. I can't find pumice in Melbourne, Australia, but I can get vermiculite and or perlite. Is that a similar compound? I believe that they are manufactured and not natural. Very good question. Now, in our All You Need to Know About Pumice video, I tell you that this is what we use. We use a mixture of pumice, clay, and long-term nutrients, where the pumice is the main act. We have almost all of the contents is pumice, and then we add some clay to be able to get that cation exchange capacity and to be able to capture the nutrients that are coming through when we water with fertilizer. Now, is vermiculite or perlite a substitution for pumice? It is a substitution if you have normal planting soil that you've added pumice to. Then you can have normal planting soil and add vermiculite, or have normal planting soil and add perlite if you want to. What will happen here is that all of these 3 components are going to help the soil to both be more airy, get more air to the roots, and also keep more moisture at the same time, which is perfect. And all these 3 components does that to normal soil. So it's perfect to mix that up. That is fine. But if the question is, can you use vermiculite or perlite as a substitution for pumice when you are planting in a pure mix pumice with added clay or something, then the answer is no. And the reason is that vermiculite, for instance, it's a natural component because it is a mineral, but it has been heated by mankind. So it's a mineral that has been heated to a certain point, and that is why it's gotten this, it has a almost sponge-like surface to it. But vermiculite is actually a form of clay. It is we call it lerskiffer in Swedish. I think the correct translation in English is shale, lerskiffer. It is a form of layered clay that mankind has heated up, and it's gotten a structure where it's quite spongy-like. And the vermiculite is very, very good at absorbing water. It absorbs water like a sponge. So that is why it's very good to add to a soil mix of normal soil. It absorbs a lot of water. And also the vermiculite has cation exchange capacity. It actually has a very high cation exchange capacity. So it can bind those nutrients when you add fertilizer to your soil. However, if you should use only vermiculite, it would absorb way too much water. It would never be good for the roots of most type of indoor plants. That is why vermiculite doesn't work as a substitute for pumice. Pumice has that perfect mixture of air, water, and substrate, that perfect balance between water and oxygen. It's perfect. So then we have perlite. Now perlite is actually a volcanical material, just like pumice. However, perlite is also heated up by man. And when that happens, it puffs up almost like a popcorn and gets a very, very light structure. So when you add perlite, it almost wants to float on water. So it's very, very light. And also, it doesn't have this perfect balance of water and oxygen inside of it. So that is why perlite doesn't work as a substitute for pure pumice planting. I'm saying pure pumice, but I've said before that you need to add something that has. So you could, for instance, if you use mostly pumice and add vermiculite to that mixture, then you get that cation exchange capacity. That would work fine, but not pure vermiculite or not pure perlite. So the reason here, the thing you have to consider here is really, what are you trying to accomplish? What is it that you want out of your soil? Now we use pumice to all types of plants, even orchids, even succulents. It works fantastically, because even if pumice should be taking on too much water for succulents, for instance, it doesn't matter, because even if it has 30% of its volume with water, it still has that air that the roots need. The only thing you need to consider there if you're planting succulents in pumice is that you just need to let it dry out in between watering. But when you water, it will get that perfect balance of water and oxygen all the time. So I'm sad to say that you need to try and find pumice, and then you could add clay or vermiculite to that mixture to get that cation exchange capacity. Then it would work. I hope that clarifies something for you. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit that bell so you get a notification every time we put up something new, like a Q&A video like this. Please like, share and comment, and until next time, hej då!